Bonjour.
Servus. Grüß euch.
Swagat.
Hasta la próxima.
Now streaming, listen in to this true story.
Hello everyone. My name is Simona Smirnova. I'm a full-time artist, musician, composer, jazz vocalist, band leader, and a zither player based in New York City. I'm originally from Lithuania, which is a small Baltic country in Eastern Europe. I came to the United States 8 years ago to pursue my dreams and to study at Berklee College of Music. Berklee is a prestigious contemporary music school which provides education for a lot of contemporary artists around the world. I came after my first undergrad. I studied in Lithuania jazz vocal performance at first at the Lithuanian Academy of Music and Theater. And while I was finishing my studies, I was already thinking about moving somewhere else and learning jazz, deepen my knowledge in jazz. And United States seemed like the best place to do so. But my story started way back in the pivotal moment of Lithuania as a country. I haven't talked about this topic yet publicly, and I decided to start talking about it now because I think that a lot of people can source some inspiration from my story. And also, I realized that the trauma behind it was so great that I wasn't able to face it. And at this point where I feel like it's somewhat resolved and I can look at it with pure state of mind and face it, learn from it, acknowledge for what it was and for what it is, and how it manifests today in my daily life as an artist, and share my story with other people. So from today's perspective, I'm a thriving artist. I compose on a regular basis. I compose string quartet, chamber music, original jazz music. I lead a jazz quartet and I perform in New York City, in the United States, in different states, and I tour. I travel to Australia, to New Zealand, to European countries, and I collaborate with local musicians by playing jazz clubs, and I perform my original music. I also actively involved in community work. I support Lithuanian community in the United States. I sing in churches. I teach at the Lithuanian schools. I teach students to sing Lithuanian songs and play ethnic instruments. But as today, I'm looking back and I'm thinking where it is all coming from and where I'm coming from. And this motif, this theme of sense of belonging would keep coming in the themes I'm exploring in my creative practice. I was born during the revolution in Lithuania. We were breaking out from Soviet Union, and I was born at the end of 80s. At that point, we had singing revolution, which is actually a term for that time. We call it a singing revolution because people didn't have guns. It was nonviolent resistance. But we were breaking out of communism. We wanted to be an independent country. That was the time when I was born. And as you can imagine, the country which transitions from one regime to another, there's a lot of challenges to that. So it happened. My childhood became this very, very strange experience, which left a mark for the rest of my life. And the mark was called poverty. I was raised in a village. We really didn't have any access to anything or assets. The village had probably 10 or 12 wooden houses, and people lived from farming. So as Soviet Union worked at that moment, it was a lot of farming, a lot of animals and agriculture. My father happened to be a vet as well, so we always had animals, and he was always working with animals. My mom would kind of leave her calling to be an artist for that moment, and she was taking care of animals as well. So our whole life was surrounded around cats and dogs, pigs and cows and chickens and horses and rabbits, and all the animals around. So I was just this child on my own, and in the village we didn't have any schools or really nothing to do except agriculture activities. And I was engaged into kind of like a child labor very soon. So when I was 4 or 5, in those circumstances, usually children are used for labor. And I mean that in a good way, I guess, because it made me stronger. But I had to do all these things when I was 5 or 6, which means weeding the beets, weeding gardens, planting potatoes, collecting grass for rabbits. And I have an older sister, so she would have even harder tasks. I was younger, so I would do like smaller tasks. But I still vividly remember those days when we would go to fields of beets and we would weed for the whole day, and we would have like a very humble lunch pack, which would be like a piece of bread and maybe a boiled egg, and we would share that. We didn't even have watches. We would look at the sun when it's time to go back. And I still remember those memories, and I feel like they're so alive within me. So in these circumstances, somehow I discovered a calling for arts, which is so strange. So it all started from the school time, and I was always very eager to learn, very curious. My sister went to school and she had homework, and I just kept nagging my mom that I want to go to school, and I was so jealous that she had homework. Can you imagine that from a 5-year-old? I was going crazy how much I wanted to do homework as well. And my mom just didn't know what to do with me. So she took me to school when I was 5. And going to school also was a journey itself, because we lived in the village in the woods and there is no school. So we had to go for probably like 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles through the woods, and going to the closest town. It was a very small town. We had one school and like a couple of stores and a library and a church there. So that's where I started going to school. And I still remember those mornings where you have to wake up like 5, 6 a.m. The house we lived in, also, it wasn't just like a village house as we would think. It didn't have sewer, it didn't have water. A lot of times it wouldn't have electricity. We would cook on the fire, and if we want water, we would have to go out and get it from the well. The bathroom was outside behind the barn, so sometimes it would be very cold at night to go to the bathroom, and there is nothing easy about living like that. But since I was a child and I was never exposed to middle class living or like wealthy lifestyle, I thought that that's how everyone lives, so I didn't think about it much. And as I think from today's perspective, it was also very healthy, because I had established relationship with the land, with animals, with nature, and it built me stronger. I understood where the food is coming from, how much work it takes to make bread, how long it takes to have bacon, how long it takes to have steak. All these things, when I look at them today, attractively served on our tables, I know what it takes to make it all. So it builds strength, but at that time, maybe I was also exposed to a little bit too many harsh circumstances as a child. And when I started going to school, we would have to walk very early. It was harsh winters. Sometimes we would reach -30 Celsius. You walk and you can't really breathe, and it's woods. It's not like city winter. It's freezing cold weather blowing into your face, and you don't get a ride. It's you wake up and you walk in the dark, and your older sister drags you by holding your hand, and you like wrapped up that you barely can walk. If you fall down, you can't really get up because of all these layers of clothes. And you get to school really, really cold. And then school was very fun all the time. I really loved it. Since the home environment wasn't the healthiest, sometimes I would show some violent behaviors, but I really didn't understand what I was doing. I was just 5 or 6. But at that point, I realized that that I want to be a musician. We did have a guitar at home, and I really wanted to play it. My sister played an accordion. I kept asking my mom, can I go to the music school? And thank God we had the system of state music schools, which are free or for a very, very low rate, kind of like a symbolic payment. You can have musical education, which is really great. And but it also, in the town where we had our school, we didn't have music school. The music school was in the district center in the larger city. So in order to go to music school, we needed to take a local bus and ride it for about 40 minutes to the city, and then attend the classes, and then go back to the town, and then walk by foot through the forest to our village. Now when I think about it, it sounds like a trip, really a big sacrifice towards music, but I didn't feel that. And I remember first time going to the music school, and I said, I want to play the guitar. And teachers looked at my hands and they said, your hands are too small. And they're still quite small, actually. I always had pretty small hands. So they said, you have to wait. And I said, no way. I will not be waiting anymore. So they suggested to play kanklės. And kanklės it's what I call zither. It's not really a zither, but it's something closest to zither, so for people to understand. It's a string instrument you play on your lap. It's 29 strings and it has levers, works like lever harp. And when the teacher played through glissando, that's it. My life stopped right there. I thought, I want to be a kanklės player for the rest of my life. I want to be a musician. And at that point I was 7. And now when I look back, if there is a definition of calling, I think I experienced it at that moment. Because I felt that this is a gateway to break the pattern of poverty. This is a gateway to break the pattern of suffering and lack and isolation and shame. And that's what poverty brings. It's isolation. How does that manifest? It manifests in every day. And if you come from poverty, you can really understand these things. It's when you're in school and everyone goes to the field trip, but you know by default that you can't, because field trip involves some sort of down payment from parents, or if it's free, still a lunch in the city, maybe an ice cream or something, and that was not an option for us. If you live in poverty, all the kids have certain type of shoes or a toy, and you know that it's not an option for you from the beginning. You just raised from knowing and to think from perspective of lack. You know that you lack and you don't have the assets for anything what's happening around you. So the isolation and the sense of shame was always around me. But I was so blessed that I had access to music, because in music that did not matter. What mattered, can I play the notes? Can I play in time? Can I sing in tune? Do I do my homework? And these were the vehicles for me to feel some sort of power and some sort of ability to change my current state. And again, we are talking about a 7-8-year-old girl in a post-communist country. So I grew up loving music and thinking about it so seriously. At that point, I also started receiving these invitations to participate in school plays, be in theater. And it didn't matter for me what role I would get. I could be a tree in the corner. I could be, a puppet, which comes in for 1 second and comes out throughout the whole show. I didn't care about it. I just wanted to be a part of some sort of another universe where the gravity, it makes sense, where you put in the work and the consequence are good, where you speak and someone is listening to you. When you do a good deed, you receive a good deed back in one form or another, sooner or later. I did feel that in the field of arts, these laws do exist. And my presence was important. That's why I started leaning into arts more and more throughout my life. And I feel that that was a source of resilience for the rest of my life. After music school and after we moved out from the village, so in the village I spent 8 years of my life, and then we moved out to a bigger town. And then everything kind of got easier with time. And although we still were very poor and I would always experience these isolating moments, for example, when you're playing with your friends on the block, you play basketball or something on the swings. And at some point when parents come back from work and they start cooking dinner, there would be these smells coming through the windows. And I knew that it's not for our window because we never had food. And all the kids would get called by their parents to eat dinner. And I was never called because mom had to work very long shifts. And basically we never had dinner. And when people ask what's your favorite breakfast, I wouldn't know because I didn't grow up eating breakfast. We just didn't have that. But I was already older and I understood that a lot of things are in my hands. In one way or another, if I keep working, I can break out from this pattern. Is it generational? I'm not sure. Is it generational? But I think that it was circumstantial. It's the political transitional moment in the country. And the fact that there was no one to look up to was hard, but I always felt like I can lean into arts. Then I started just diving into practicing piano, practicing singing, composing songs, playing guitar, writing plays, drawing, and just on and on. I was into reading books, into being a good student. I was like a straight A student, a student parliament, student president, all these organizations. I was a part of a Catholic organization. I would volunteer. I would do a lot of creative projects with my peers and participate in different competitions. And it just became this whole thing, which became, again and again, I realized that it's a vehicle for resilience. It's a vehicle for healing. And after that, I went to study in the academy after high school, and I studied jazz vocal performance. And after that, I auditioned for the best music college in the world, which is Berklee College of Music for contemporary music. And I got the scholarship to study there, and I studied composition there. And at this point, I'm 5 years after my graduation. And although I'm still growing and I'm learning a lot of things, I start to think about this past, where I'm coming from, more and more. And as the stigma resolves through talking about it, and the pain and shame and trauma behind it, I realized that as it was so tragic in some way, there was also such a big gift. And my life is a manifestation of integrity, when it doesn't matter where you're coming from and what was given to you, what assets you had. What matters is the sense of direction and the resilience in everyday actions you're taking for your calling to manifest throughout your life, and fighting for the life you really want. When I was living in the village, I would never think that I would be a full-time artist in New York City. I don't think I even understood that could be a thing, or being an artist is a thing. I haven't seen it in adults. But then when I grew up, I still would never think that would be an option. But one thing after another, and one thing after another, and you're breaking through these walls, and it teaches you a lot. Today, as an artist, I am constantly exploring these themes of belonging, themes of family, of homeland. It comes from my childhood, probably. And I'm thinking about this little Simona running around the village barefoot, playing with all the animals, working in the garden. I have this sort of feeling towards her that it's a responsibility to make her proud for who I am right now. And there was a lot of pivotal moments throughout this whole story. But I think that the biggest thing is that the tragic events and the loss and traumas which we experience throughout our life, they're not fair. They're not fair for anyone. But they're so needed if they're handled with wisdom. They're so needed for us to grow. And I wish everyone who is listening to find that vehicle they can gravitate to and use as a source for resilience. In my case, it was arts. It was music, it was composition, it was theater. For other people, it can be something else. But I wish everyone who is listening to this on podcast to think about what is their source of resilience and what is their calling they're leaning towards. And just lean into that side of yours and that small little child of yours, the little artist of yours. Look into his or her eyes and ask, who are you? Thank you for listening to me. This was Simona Smirnova. I'm currently in New York City. Thank you for listening to my story. And I wish you all the best in your own personal journey through resilience and through your calling.
Goodbye.
Au revoir.
Good night.
Alvida.
Hasta la próxima.